Hey folks, and welcome back to another episode of Straight Talk Whiskey. I am Nick, as always, and thanks for joining us for episode number 45 in our series of whiskey reviews. And today we are going to head back to the Irish whiskies and look at a lovely single malt whiskey which is now produced by the Cooley Distillery in Northern Ireland called the Tyrconnell single malt Irish whiskey. So it comes in a nice little tin here. If this is sort of the entry bottle, if you will, that you might find in the stores. There's also about 3 other, I believe, Tyrconnells that you can find out there that are matured or at least finished in different casks, different types of casks. So what we have here is a single malt Irish whiskey that dates back to the mid-18th century and was actually around for a good number of years, not too long as, compared to others, but ended in about 1925. And it wasn't until about the 80s, the 1980s, when John Teeling, which we might know from some of the Teeling whiskeys, and his 2 sons, Jack and Stephen, that took over that, is the Cooley Distillery that now produces this. So for a while, it gets a little bit confusing when you look at Kilbeggan and Cooley, and you try to decipher which one owns what, and you look at Kilbeggan and then Beam, right? Jim Beam, it's a huge company that holds a bunch of different whiskeys in its portfolio, which was then bought in 2011 or so, maybe a little bit later, I'm not exactly sure about the date, by Suntory, right, the Japanese company, which became Beam Suntory. So you got a lot of different players, in this game vying over, holding this whiskey in its portfolio and that sort of thing. But basically what it comes down to is this whiskey had been dormant since 1925 and was revitalized, almost 50 years later. So it is a great thing that we have this back on the shelves of liquor stores, and sometimes it's underlooked, or overlooked rather, and it may not be your go-to Irish whiskey when you're looking for something, because there's not a lot of advertising out there, there's not a lot of dollars that go into the marketing campaigns for this sort of whiskey. So, in my opinion, it gets overlooked in a way. But it's actually a really interesting whiskey. So what we have here, obviously, as we said, single malt. It's bottled at the standard 40% ABV, 80 proof, your entry level, the same as your Jameson, your Bushmills, that sort of thing. Tell them more even. Now, the Tyrconnell name comes from a racehorse way back in the day that the odds of it winning were, I think, 100 to 1 or something like that, and of course, it ended up winning, and that is what it is named off of. So, that comes from, that became sort of the family name, and it is produced now in Northern Ireland. So, let's go in and try some. Now, I haven't tried some of the other finishes. There's I believe that I know for sure is a Madeira one cast that I haven't tried before, and about 2 others that obviously I haven't tasted before, but will definitely be on the list of ones to look out for. Now the price of those is definitely up there. This entry level is somewhere between $55 and $60, I believe. I want to say, because I got this a while ago, and that was sort of the price range when I got it at my liquor store. And the other versions, the different cast finishes, were upwards of $79 to $85. Now that's a little bit high for my taste. I could get something that has a little bit more, I would say, gusto behind it, like some of the spot whiskeys that you might see up here, the yellow spot, the green spot, something like that. In that price range, the yellow spot you can find for, right now, in the $70 area, if you're lucky, but it could be upwards, close to $100 for yellow spot. But you have the age behind that, you have good proof, right, and just a phenomenal tasting whiskey. So, it's yet to be tasted by me, so I don't know, I can't say for sure, but for that sort of price, I'm hoping that there's a little bit more information and honesty, really, about the whiskey, what's in the glass, before I go and taste it, and before I go and buy something that's high priced. $80 range is a little bit steep, and I want, definitely want to be informed before I go into buying that. So, let us go in. We see the color here, very typical of Irish whiskeys. We have a nice pale gold, slight honey, that sort of thing. Nothing too crazy, right? So, caramel coloring, don't know, maybe a little bit, little hint, not sure. Let's go in for the nose. The first thing that you get right away is these nice, fragrant, fruity notes. Just nice, soft, fruity, nothing too punchy, nothing too exotic, but just a nice array. Nice, some apples, definitely some cinnamon in there. But definitely the malt characteristic is still in there. You have nice, fresh baked bread going on in there. Just lovely. It's all very nice. It's all very airy, light, fragrant, that sort of thing. There's nothing overpowering. There's nothing that is sort of punching, to get its way into your senses. But just a nice, soft, smooth, simple, making no big fuss. No fuss, no muss, you know what I mean? Just lovely. A slight honey note in there. Something a little bit sweet, a little syrupy about it, in a way. So let's go in for the taste. So refreshing. Absolutely on par with the nose. What I get is some fresh baked apples in there, some other fruits, nothing too citrusy, nothing like orange or anything like that, but just a nice calm, almost like you get some of those blueberries that are not too tart, but are just a little bit sweet. Not something that you would use for like a blueberry pie, but just something that's nice, fresh, picked off the tree or something like that if you're blueberry picking. Just nice, subtle, just basically gets the essence of it. So apple, blueberry is definitely in there. That malty characteristic just brings everything together. Keeps everything in a nice, tight little package with the sort of coating of the honey around it. And it's just phenomenal. Really, for the price, and I have to be honest, I was a little bit skeptical when I saw the price of this, knowing that it is, 40% ABV. It doesn't tell you a whole lot. Yeah, it's a single malt. Yeah, it tells you where it was from, that sort of thing. But it doesn't really give you the facts behind, what went on in the process, such as what type of barrel it was aged in, how long, that sort of thing. So, and you might be too. You might have been a little bit skeptical if you have been at that point where you're questioning which Irish whiskeys you might be looking into buying for your collection or for tasting and that sort of thing. Even at a bar you might have seen it and sort of passed it up because the price was a little bit too high and you didn't know enough about it. So that's where I was at. But have no fear, we've tasted it. It is really a nice, concise, but airy, sweet, delicate, fragrant sort of palette and conglomeration of flavors and aromas that are going on in there that are just wonderful, and it's great. And I talked before about just giving it a little bit of a whirl around there in the glass. It doesn't kill it to swirl it around just a little bit in the glass. You're not shaking it. You're not vigorously shaking the bottle up and down. Right? It's just moving around. It's letting the oxygen get into it. It's been sitting on the shelf for a while. It needs some air, right, to open up and that sort of thing. There's a lot of people out there that say, if you whirl around a whiskey like that, like you are the devil or something like that. No. Okay. You should not be looked down upon for doing that. And you're basically just opening it up, getting it to swirl around, breathe, let some of those aromas go out of the glass. That's why they created glasses like this, the Glencairn. And some brandy snifters are great for this, and I have a Capita nosing glass, that sort of thing. The glass is designed to bring those aromas to your nose. Every every time I go back to it. Now, I'm not going to leave this up for 3 days and expect to have the same sort of boutique that the whiskey would have if you just poured a glass, right? It's just stupid to think that would be true. But if I leave it up for a little bit, if I roll it around a little bit, just try to, get things cooking, if you will. Still smell the same thing. Still smell the same thing, folks. Nothing changed. Nothing escaped. It's not running out the door. It's still there, right? We don't need to be that crazy about it. It's whiskey. It's got a solid base. It's been aging for years and years and years. It can stand up to a little swirl in the glass, folks. That's just my opinion. That's why it's straight talk whiskey, so I'm going to give it to you straight. That's just the way it is. Now, that being said, if it is an older whiskey, if it is something upwards of 12 years, you have to look at what it is. If it's a Scotch and it's a little bit older, yeah, it's still fine to give it a little bit of a swirl. If it's 15, 20 years, you might want to be a little more gentle with it, just because it has been there for so long, right? Older things you tend to be a little bit more careful, a little bit more delicate with. That's just the way things work. That's how we understand the world to be. But this, at 40% ABV, we don't have an age statement. We don't have that much information behind it. It's okay to give it a little bit of a swirl to get it to open up if it's been on your shelf, that sort of thing. You shouldn't feel worried about doing that, and you shouldn't feel like there is some stigma from doing that. It's just not true, folks. That being said, all that time I just wasted on that little rant, if you will, to you. My goodness, it's all still there in the glass. It did not escape again. Getting back to the whiskey, just lovely. The fragrance is just beautiful. It's what sort of the epitome of an Irish whiskey in the single malt version of an Irish whiskey you would want to be. Just sort of the whole package in there. Let's go in for a taste, see if there's anything else. Most likely aged in ex-bourbon barrels. It could be their second fill in these bourbon barrels, because there's not an overpowering sense of that oak or any vanilla and that sort of thing. You have the creaminess from the malt, but you don't have the vanilla notes that you would get from a heavy interaction between wood and spirit with a bourbon barrel, right? So most likely, because that is pretty popular, is to have whiskey aged in ex-bourbon barrels, but may not be the case, I'm not sure. But they have, maybe that's why I'm thinking that they have the sherry and more, Madeira, sort of the dessert wine finishes in it, is because their standard entry line, the 40% ABV, Tyrconnell single malt, is just aged, in the ex-bourbon barrels, which is totally fine. But, that being the case, it doesn't really shine through at any great extent through the whiskey, which is fine, time and place for everything. Just really nice. Like I said, what can be said that hasn't been said already? It's nice, really concise, sweet, just beautiful. It's like drinking a nice glass of wine that, upon entry has these nice little fruitiness to it. You're not going to get the same malt characteristic that's unique to whiskey, and that's why I like it so much. But, because it has its own unique flavors and aromas and that sort of thing. But it acts very similar to a wine in the sense that, the mouthfeel and the finish is pretty dry. It cleans up pretty quick after itself. So you do have that similar notion to a drier wine. So, just wonderful. If you can find some out there, if you've got a bar that serves this and it's not too outrageous of a price, go ahead and find some and just take a taste and try for yourself. It's just, I know a lot of people think of Irish whiskey and they say, well, Jameson. That's the first thing that comes to their head. maybe Tullamore Dew if they know a little bit more, if they've been around, Bushmills, that sort of thing. But, you know, put a Tyrconnell on your radar, because I do believe it is up there in the single malts. I definitely think it could compete with Tullamore Dew's single malt, Bushmill's single malt. Certainly, I feel like those three could be on par with each other and be perfectly valid for whatever your taste may be. Indifferent enough that you could discern between the three of those, which might be really interesting, and maybe that's a video we'll do at some point, to have the three single malts from three different Irish distilleries. Could be interesting. So, look for that in the future as we get a little bit more bold in our whiskey reviews. But, for Straight Talk Whiskey, this has been episode number 45. Thanks for joining. As always, we're getting close to the new year, and I'm going to do a special segment sort of on the whiskey of the year, so be looking for that. It'll be something that, sort of, if you watch other whiskey reviewers, and I won't give their names, but they do sort of a end of the year whiskey of the year that is sort of the most upfront. You know, it's not hiding like, oh, I don't know what this was aged in, I don't know how many years this has been aged in, but gives you all that information, tells you that it's been non-chill filtered, says that there's no caramel, maybe, you know, something that's just upfront, good quality, good price, you know, good bang for your buck, and it's just an overall whiskey you'd like to come back to over and over again, and would recommend to family and friends. That's what it's all about. So, we'll be looking around for that, doing a little research, and maybe something we've already done, and maybe something that I find within these next couple weeks leading up to the new year. So, we'll see what happens, but as always, drink responsibly, have a great week, and we'll see you next time.